សូមអញ្ជើញអង្គុយ
President, please be seated.
អង្គជំនុំជម្រះតុលាការ
The Supreme Court chamber is back in session after discussion and deliberation during lunchtime. The Supreme Court chamber grants 25 minutes for the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia. You may now proceed with your line of questioning, counsel.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honours. Good afternoon, Counsel. And good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I would like to take you back to the first months of 1975. The attack, the final attack on Pursat, Battambang, Sisophon, and other cities in the northwest. Do you know who was militarily leading the final attack? Who was in charge of the attack, final attack on these cities?
Witness. Good afternoon, Your Honours and everyone. Rohnyam was the one who led the final attacks.
My apologies, something went wrong, Mr. President. You said, I believe, that Nim was in charge of the final attack. What about Kleng? Did he have a role in the preparation of the final attack?
Answer. He was the general staff. He was part of the general staff.
And was he involved in the planning of the attacks?
Answer, yes, he was involved.
And what exactly was your role?
I was a messenger, merely a messenger, carrying messages from from the battlefield to the rear battlefield.
Was it indeed a joint attack from the two divisions belonging to the Northwest Zone? A joint attack on all these cities at the same time, somewhere in April 75?
Answer, the areas were divided during the attacks. Division 1007 was in charge of the attack from the south to the north, and Division 1006, which was noted down on the letter, was responsible attacking from the north to the south.
Mr. Witness, you call these divisions 1006 and 1007 respectively. At the time, were they also known under a different number?
Answer. The numbers were not used on the envelope. I saw such figures 1007 and 1006, and in the message itself the figure 06 and 07 were used.
When were both divisions finally successful in beating definitively the Lon Nol army? How many days after 17 April 75 was that the case?
Answer. I could not figure it out how many days. It was after the 6th or perhaps a few days after that date.
Once the Lon Nol forces were formally, officially beaten, what happened then with the population of Battambang or Pursat? Were people evacuated?
Answer. After the country was immediately liberated, Tawai was in charge of the radio station of Jomkajej. He was in charge of announcing to Lon Nol force to lay down weapons, and people in general felt very happy and delighted about that. Later on, I do not tell you the exact date. Later on, the happiness turned into distress. People were evacuated from their houses in towns into the forest. No more houses for people to live in.
And what happened to the Lon Nol armed forces who had just surrendered and had put down their weapons? What happened to them?
Answer. They were gathered to welcome the late King Norodom Sihanouk. They were transported in vehicles, and I felt jealous at that time because I was thinking that I was living in the forest for so long and I was not allowed to go and welcome the late king. 10 days later, I realized that these former soldiers were taken away and killed.
And who within the Northwest Zone forces was responsible for the decision that these former Lon Nol military were to be killed?
You know, Mr. President, I have one objection. The question, who within the Northwest military presumes something, that it was a person within the Northwest military. So I'd ask counsel to phrase the question neutrally as to who was responsible.
I have no problem in doing that, Mr. President. Who, Mr. Witness, was responsible for the killing, the physical act of killing? I mean, who was in charge of executing former Lon Nol military? Who did the actual killing? Can you tell us a little bit more?
បាទខ្ញុំមិន
Answer. I have no full information. What I saw is that these people were put in truck in vehicles and taken away to welcome the late King Sihanouk. The vehicles were the kind of CMC trucks with cover, and they were told that they had to go and welcome the late king at that time. I felt envious because I was not allowed to go and welcome the late king. I did not know who was in charge of the killings.
Mr. Witness, let me read to you an excerpt from a statement of one of the soldiers from the Northwest Zone, somebody who testified in court, so I can pronounce his name. It's witness with the name Ung Chat. Mr. President, that is document E3/5774, English 00284420, French 00352333, and Khmer 00277333. Now I will read a small excerpt from his statement and then I will ask your reaction, Mr. Witness. Question: did Tasarun Battalion participate in the operation to kill Lon Nol soldiers at Tulpochre? Answer: those participated personally were Takleng, Tasot, and Tasan. On that same English page, on the top of that page, it says as follows: where were the Khmer Rouge soldiers who carried out the killing of those Lon Nol soldiers from? And Chat answers as follows, Mr. Witness: my unit in the 26th Battalion was not involved with this operation. As I knew it, those were troops of Battalion 201 from Sector 7 and the zone troops of Battalion 24 who carried out this operation. Could you please give a reaction to this statement?
I don't think it's particularly helpful to just read a statement and ask a witness for a reaction. He can testify to his knowledge. He's already talked about the fact he learned about these events 10 days later. If counsel has a specific question from that as to whether or not this witness is aware or agrees or disagrees, that would be fine.
If I had all the time in the world, Mr. President, I surely would approach it more openly. But he has already indicated that he isn't quite sure of who was responsible militarily. That's why I thought it'd be appropriate to confront him with these specific excerpts. So at this stage, I think I would be entitled to read out these excerpts from Ung Chat's statement.
President, the council wanted to confirm with the witness and wanted to hear the reaction from the witness. And it's very difficult for witness to give and reactions to that question or to the excerpt read by counsel. Could you please rephrase your question so that the witness could give the response to you?
Certainly, Mr. President. Um, Mr. Witness, were forces of Division 1006 or 1007, as you call them, involved in the killing or execution of these former Lon Nol soldiers?
Witness, I do not know. As I said, I was a messenger from the headquarters of Tanyam to the rear battlefield office 20, and I do not know about that.
But who decided that these military who had surrendered were to be killed, and why? What was the reason to kill these soldiers?
Answer, I do not know.
You do not know who, and you also do not know why? Is that my understanding?
Answer, yes, that is correct.
Considering the structure, the military structure of divisions 1006 and 1007, being led by your foster father, is it correct when I say to you, or when I put to you, that it was your foster father who ordered the execution of these Lon Nol soldiers?
Witness, I have no idea. Because I was merely a messenger carrying messages. I cannot say whether what you have just said correct or not.
Later in the year, Mr. Witness, you became the Deputy Chief of the General Staff. In that same year, you were also responsible for collecting the weapons that had belonged to these soldiers. Did you hear in that capacity later as to who gave the order to kill these people?
Answer, I did not hear of it later on. I was in charge of collecting weapons and put them in piles at Chamkache farms. That is the work that I did. One had to mind their own business at that time. We did not care about other business.
But you did hear or had heard that all these soldiers were invited to a meeting so that they could see the king. You said that you were even a little bit jealous that you were not present, that you were in the forest. When did you hear this, and who told you?
Answer, these soldiers were told to welcome the late king by Tawany.
But when did you hear that this was the invitation? This was what was happening, and that they were fooled into this meeting, and that they were subsequently killed. When did you hear this for the first time?
Answer, It was after I carried a message to Telegram Office 20.
And when was this, 76 or 77? 75 maybe?
ប្រហែល
Answer. It happened a long time ago. I could not give you the exact dates, but from my estimate, it was 10 days after the country was liberated. Perhaps it was a bit below that or above that.
So quite quickly after the liberation, you had heard about the fate of these Lonol soldiers. Is that correct? Very quickly after?
Yeah, no, perhaps I think the record might be clarified because the witnesses talked about when he learned about the call for soldiers to go meet the king. And then as I recollect his testimony, he said he didn't immediately learn the fate. So the question, it might be helpful to clarify which counsel's asking about. When he heard about the call to see the king or when he heard about the ultimate fate.
I was referring in my question, maybe that was unclear, to, and I will rephrase, the moment, Mr. Witness, that you had heard about the fate of these soldiers. When did you hear that they were killed? Was that briefly after the liberation?
Answer. I stated earlier already, it was after the liberation. It was perhaps 10 days after the liberation or a bit shortly before or after 10 days. It happened a long time ago, so I could not give you exact estimates.
Did you speak to Kleng or to your foster father and ask him why did these people have to be killed? What was the reason behind it? Did you have any conversation about the why?
Answer. I did not question the client. He was living in his own way, and I, as a messenger, living about 50 meters away from his place. I was residing in a separate house from him. He was living with his people in Kampong Pet commune, Panya village. When he gave me messages, and these messages were already sealed in the envelopes, I had to forward these messages to the office at the upper level part of that place, and I had to return after I had given messages to that office. And after I took messages and delivered to that place, I returned to my normal place, and I was away from his office.
Mr. Witness, let me try it differently. Let me try to ask you the question differently. Today you're giving testimony in the appeal that Nuon Chi and Kyu Pan initiated against a judgment, the judgment of the trial chamber. And in this judgment, the trial chamber held that it was your foster father Nim who ordered the execution of these soldiers. Is that correct or is that false?
That's been asked and answered as far as his knowledge of whether Nim ordered the execution.
I thought I'd try it a bit differently. It's true, I've asked the question. But I think I should be able to ask the question, did your foster father order the execution of these former Lon Nol soldiers and officials? Mr. Witness.
Again, it's the same question. I don't know if there's a ruling. I respect whatever ruling is given, but I object.
បាទសំណួរហ្នឹងគឺសំណួរដដែលមែនប៉ុន្តែ
President, the question is repetitive, but Mr. Witness, you are instructed to give your response once again.
ខ្ញុំមិនដឹងថា
Witness, I do not know which level ordered the killings.
Very well, Mr. Witness. Do you know if after the liberation in April 75, within the military of the Northwest Zone, there were sentiments of feelings of revenge against brutal actions, brutal decapitating heads, brutal military actions of the Lon Nol army? Do you know of any of these existing sentiments?
Answer, I have never heard of such words described by you. I heard only that the country was liberated, so people could meet with the families and live with their families members happily.
And my final question to you, Mr. Witness, is relating to more specifically events at this fortress at Tulpo Chre. There is evidence which suggests that the heads of the Lon Nol commanding officers of this fort were decapitated and put on the posts of that fortress. I would like to show you a photo from before the liberation in April 75, and I would like to ask your reaction. Mr. President, that's also my final question. It is, and we have discussed this with the AV unit, document E319, English 00396327, and French 006396338. I apologize, it's E39.
លោកមេធាវីអាន
President, Council, please read the reference number slowly so that interpreter could catch up.
Sorry, it's a photo from a book written by Philip Short. It's E3/9, and the English is 00396327, and French 006396338. There is no Khmer version because it's a photo. So with your permission, Mr. President, I would seek leave for the AV unit to put this photo on the screen and ask the witness his reaction. Do we have permission, Mr. President, to show it on the screen to the witness?
President, yes, you may do so, and the photo could be projected.
Yes. Mr. Witness, it's about the photo that you see in front of you. The caption reads as follows. In the civil war, which followed, the civil war between 70 and 75, government troops took the heads of communist soldiers as trophies. Is this, what you see on that photo, something that somehow jogs your memory?
Mr. President, Your Honors, perhaps we need a little reminder of why we're here. We're here for an appeal hearing on the judgment in Case 2-1. What counsel is showing is evidence of a war crime committed by Lon Nol soldiers. That's not even relevant to any defense in this case 2-1 or in 2-2. There's a fundamental principle of international criminal law, tu quo que. The crimes of some other force do not excuse the crimes charged. You cannot use as a defense, well, other people did it too. So the question is completely irrelevant and perhaps indicative that this witness has no evidence relevant to the appeal.
Mr. President, if I may briefly respond. As you know, of course, the main argument in our defense in the appeal is there was no policy to execute former Lon Nol military. We have also indicated the possibility that whatever happened at Tu Po Tre was the result of revenge against actions of Lon Nol troops. Certainly I agree with the prosecution that revenge in itself is not an excuse to execute unarmed soldiers. However, it might have been a factor at play. So I think my question is appropriate, and I should be entitled to ask the witness whether actions such as portrayed on this photo led to any sentiments of wanting to seek revenge against these troops.
President, I want to clarify with the counsel a little bit. So the photo that you asked to project a moment ago, what year did it happen?
In the Civil War, so between 1970 and 1975.
President, so this photo perhaps was taken before 1975, so the observation of the co-prosecutor is correct because it is not within the scope of trial in this case 002/01. So do you have any other questions to put to this witness, or you may repress your question?
Mr. President, your observation is completely correct. However, the actions at Tu Po Tre are indeed part of this appeal, and I'm only trying to establish whether atrocities committed by the Lon Nol army had any influence on the decision taken by Runim to execute soldiers at Tu Po Tre. That's what I'm trying to establish. I'm not trying to discuss a war crime, possible war crime committed by Lon Nol, but I'm trying to see if there is a connection between these atrocities and the subsequent actions possible of revenge by the Northwest Zone forces.
President, Mr. Witness, you are instructed to give your response if you have. Witness, I want to say that I cannot give my response because I do not know.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Your Honors.
President, thank you. Next, you have the floor. Counsel for Mr. Kyo Sompon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, witness. My name is Arthur Verken, and I am one of Que S'en Pense counsels. I have a few brief questions to put to you. It won't take that long, or at least I hope so. First of all, I would like to ask you for some clarification with regard to your role as a messenger. Because when you were questioned by the investigators, it appeared, according to me at least, but of course you can tell me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be saying that your role as a messenger did not simply consist in carrying messages, but also in carrying out security duties. Is that true or not?
During the communication of messages, I also performed as a security personnel. However, when I actually communicated the messages to the front battlefield, that was the sole task that I did.
Fine. So you were not in charge of ensuring Rosnim's security, is that so?
When I was at the front battlefield, I was no longer in charge of security affairs. But when I was at the rear, yes, I was involved with the security matter.
So what does it mean exactly, taking care of security matters? Can you tell us what this actually entailed?
At night time, I was on a guard duty, and it was a roster base.
Et vous gardiez quoi?
And what would you watch over?
I provided protection to my superior, of course, and to the office itself.
But what were you guarding? A house, a base, barracks? Can you be a bit more specific about what you were guarding? Were you guarding the place where Rosnim would sleep, or can you be a bit more specific about this, please?
Of course, I guarded Ruhnim at his residence where he stayed and slept. And it was a common house where Ruhnim and Taker resided together. However, it was they resided to one side each, and there were security guards there, but when needed, I would also take part in the roster system to provide them with protection.
And did this mission begin as of 1970?
Cette mission supplémentaire.
This extra security mission, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, and actually it started since the time that I moved to live with him, that is in 1970. and I was on a roster basis to get the premise, and when there was a message for me to deliver, I would carry out that task to communicate the messages to the another message office at the lower part.
So we have just seen that it is only in 1975 that cities such as Battambang and Pursat were captured. So can you tell us, in 1970 and in the following years, where was Tanim based? Where exactly was he based? Where was his house? Because it could not have been in Battambang or in Pursat. So can you provide some details about the place where he was?
I don't fully get your question. Please be more specific as to the year.
Can you provide us rapidly with the list of the different locations where Rosnim had settled between 1970 and 1975? Where were his headquarters in 1970, for example? Can you just tell us the place?
Between 1970 to 75, his office remained at the same place, that is, in the forest. I refer to office 20. His wife and children also resided there. And only in 1975, he attached to the battlefront, and for that reason he mainly resided in various locations in the forest, for instance, or at villagers' houses.
Fine. Maybe you told us this morning, and if that's the case, I apologize, but please be more specific. Speaking about a forest is a bit vague in terms of the entire northwest zone. So please, can you tell us specifically where this forest was located?
Actually, I already said it was at Phnom Thom, at Thom Mountain, which is next to Krawang Mountain.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. In your written record of interview, at answer 124 in particular, you speak about the numerous times you heard Rosnim complaining about the center. So I'm going to quote what you answered to the investigators. At answer 124, you say, I heard Rostim complain often about the center. He was depressed by the fact that people had been sent out of the cities, that money was cancelled, and he said that no country in the world had applied such policies. End of quote, free translation. So can you confirm this statement you made in 2013?
Yes, that is a statement that I made at the time. While I was with him, sometimes I would act as his driver. and he sometimes met with his former friends who were former professors, for instance, and they discussed the issue of people evacuation.
And what were they saying, therefore?
He said that the war raged throughout the world, and after the war ended, only disaster remained. And in our case, the war ended, and the only option to build the country was to obtain foreign aid. And for that reason, it was improper to evacuate the people from their homes. That's what they said.
And do you remember this episode that you just described to us? Do you remember when it happened? Can you place it in relation to other events?
That was before they attended the conference at the center. And there were other people present during the discussion, including Ta Cơ, Ta Pait, and Ta Tom. Ta Mai was also present.
So this was a big car. This is a conversation that took place in a car, or did you hear it elsewhere? According to your record, this is something that came up quite often, that Rosnim spoke about quite often.
They were speaking while they were in the car, and they also spoke about the matter while they were at the residence. They touch upon the issue of the non-circulation of the printed money, and they said that it was observed that printed money was not circulated, and it never happened in other countries in the world, and that we already had printed money, but it was not used or circulated.
Now, with regard to the evacuation of the cities, can we understand on the basis of what you said that Rosnim did not agree with that?
He opposed the evacuation of the people.
Do you remember if in 1974 you accompanied Rosnim to a meeting that lasted 2 weeks and that was held about 300 kilometers away from B20. Do you remember traveling with Rosnim to go to a meeting that lasted 2 weeks in a village which was about 40 kilometers north of Kompong Cham? Does that ring a bell?
No, not in 1974, but I think it was in 1975. And it happened after the conference.
What are you thinking about?
I don't understand your question.
Maybe my question was too broad, but you seem to be finding some kind of echo to the meeting I'm speaking to you about. But you say that it happened at another moment, and when you say 1975, was it after the 17 April victory?
Please step back a little and refresh my memory by referring to which meeting that you are referring to.
Yes, of course. Does the village of Meek and Prekok commune ring a bell? Did you ever go there with Rosnim in 1974?
No, I did not.
And without having gone there, do you remember if Rosnim traveled for 2 weeks to go to a meeting that was held about 300 kilometers away from B20?
I cannot recall that.
Did Rostim ever speak to you about a meeting which he apparently attended in 1974 and during which apparently he approved the evacuation of the cities?
No, he never said that to me. Since my task was dealing with messages, and that was mainly what I was assigned to do.
Bien sûr.
Naturally. As far as you remember, the capture of Battambang and Persat and the North Zone, the Northwest Zone, did this lead to very heavy fighting? Do you know what happened? And what do you know? Was it very, very difficult for the Revolutionary Army to completely occupy the Northwest Zone, or was it relatively easy? Can you somehow describe and tell us how this capture took place?
fighting was rather intensive, and all the senior commanders were there on the ground. And they were present at all the main spearheads, including the Nyim and the Pait. The Pait was in charge of food supply, that is logistics at the time. And Tucker was also present at the front battlefield. And I myself communicated messages from Danyem's place at the front office to office at the front battlefield to office 20, and the situation was rather intensified at the time.
A very intense situation. Can you give us more detail about this? Of course, you went to the front lines, so you were a direct witness of the fighting. Or if that was not the case, please tell us. But what do you mean by very intense situation? Do you mean that when you would travel to bring messages to the front lines, you would hear explosions, you would see the fighting, you would see soldiers maneuvering on the field? Can you tell us what was happening?
Of course, I heard the exchange of fire, and I was also at the operational headquarters at the front battlefield. Wherever it moved, I would be there in order to take the messages to the central command at the rear.
Where were you when the fighting stopped? In Pursat and in Battambang. Where were you posted then?
Three days after the fighting stopped, I returned from the front battle operational office to Kampong Preh commune in Battambang province, and there was another military headquarters there, and Nyim also returned to that office.
Yes, but you're telling me what you did 3 days later. I'm asking what you did during. So when the London troops surrendered, where were you?
I was still a messenger, and on that day I actually took a message to the front battlefield office that is on the day the fighting stopped, so that the telegram section there could relay it to the center.
Fine. And where was this frontline office located?
It was located in Kampong Preh.
Fine. Witness, earlier you spoke about the summoning of the former Lundal soldiers to go meet the king, So were you in Pursat on that day? I didn't really understand if you were speaking about something that you learned about later, or if you were physically in Pursat when the former Lon Nol soldiers were gathered. Were you at the provincial office when that happened?
I was at Kampong Prea, and there were three of us who was on a roster basis to relay messages to the center. At that particular point in time, usually there were two messages that we had to deliver each day. And it would take us one full day and night to reach the office where we delivered the message. And the ceasefire announcement actually was broadcasted via radio.
Fine, thank you very much, witness. So this place, how far was it from Pursat? How far is it from Pursat, you would say?
It was roughly 100 kilometers from Pursat.
And at that time, you are telling us that the former Lon Nol soldiers were called up and they boarded GMC trucks. And so where was Rosnim when all of this happened?
He was right there in Kampong Prea.
After the 17 April victory, and once Cambodia was unified, what did the servicemen in your zone do? Where were they assigned? What were they asked to do? Did they continue being involved in military activities, or did they begin doing other things?
I cannot tell you about that. I only knew about what was happening with my messengers group.
So within your unit, were you given the mission of trying to identify and eliminate the former servicemen of the Khmer Republic?
I did not know anything about that.
In your written record of interview of 2013 at answer 177, you were shown a telegram and you said, as far as I know, Division 1007 was assigned to repair railroads, while Division 1006 was assigned to repair National Road 5.
Defense Council, please slower your speed.
Yes, I will repeat this. I apologize. Let me repeat my question. At answer 177, in your written record of interview, you said, and I quote, after April 1975, Division 1007 was assigned to repair railroads, whereas Division 1006 was assigned to repair National Road 5. End of quote. So, do you stand by this answer or not?
Yes, I do stand by my previous statement.
When we read your 2013 record, which is very long, we understand that you became the Deputy General Staff Leader in charge of economics of the Zone Army, and this happened at the end of 1975. You said that this lasted about a month. So here I'm basing myself on answers 175 and answer 94. So can you confirm that it is at the end of 1975 that you became the deputy deputy staff leader in charge of the Zone Army?
After the return from the conference, I was at the economic section, and I was tasked to oversight the weapon warehouse.
Sometimes I wonder what kind of translation you're receiving of my questions. So let me please repeat my question. So, was it at the end of 1975 that you became the deputy leader of the general staff in charge of the economics of the Zone Army? Was this at the end of 1975?
Yes, it was in late 1975.
And was this close to the date when you left for China?
After I managed the storage of those weapons, he assigned me to go to China.
And when you were in charge of storing the weapons, were you already a deputy leader of the general staff or not?
Answer, yes. I was already the Deputy Chief of General Staff in charge of storing weapons.
So at the end of 1975, the Northwest Zone Army was still under the leadership of the zone. Is that correct?
Answer, yes, it was under the zone at that time.
Alors nous savons
Well, we know that the creation of the army had been announced in July of 75. Is your answer suggesting that there were one or two problems transferring the power of the army towards the centre. Was this a little bit more complicated in the northwest zone, so that by the end of 1975 perhaps the handover had not yet occurred? Can you enlighten us at all on this subject? Mr. President, I was told I was speaking a little fast, so I'm going to put the question again.
ទៀតព្រោះខាង
President, please repeat your question, and please be a bit slower so that interpreter could catch up.
Avec mes excuses.
Yes, I do apologize. We know that the RAK was established, or at least it was announced, in July 1975. Now, you told us that at the end of 1975 you were appointed to a position in the Zone Army, and that at the end of 75 the Northwest Zone Army was still under zone leadership. Now, do you know what the reasons for this situation were? Perhaps there were difficulties, for example, in transferring authority from zone to centre. Have you any information you can share with us on this subject?
No transferring of authority or power. It was removed at the time. The center removed the power or authority at the time. After the completion of railroads and after the completion of building national roads. And after that time, the leaders were called into a study session, after which they disappeared.
Ce retrait.
When was this withdrawal of authority from the army that you've just mentioned? Was it at the end of 1975?
No, it was not in late 1975. I could not give you the exact year. I noticed that the army was put in a tempering center. I do not know when this was removed.
About these weapons, the 20,000 weapons. From what you were saying this morning, I understood that your job was not so much to gather up these weapons from the soldiers, but that you were meant to take them to a farm near Banong, where they were stored, cleaned, and then put away in the warehouse that you set up in the forest. Have I understood correctly?
Answer: yes, that is correct.
Est-ce que
Were there only weapons in this cache? Or did you put anything else, such as food, medicines, or clothing?
Answer: no food supplies. Only weapons were kept.
Ces trois grands-pères.
And the three grandfathers who you recruited to build this weapons cache, were these people you already knew and who you found to be reliable?
Vous aviez confiance en eux?
Did you trust them?
Answer. They were old people and they used to transport of weapons and food supply during the wartime. He was the chief.
Le chef de quoi?
Chief of what?
Answer. Chief of Transportation Unit. Chief of Transportation Unit transporting weapons to the battlefront and also food supplies to the battlefront. Usually he was referred to as being a chief.
D'accord.
Very well. In your written record, you say that you were sent to China to learn how to pilot a T-28 bomber. Can you tell us a little bit more about these bombers?
It was a kind of airplane, a jet airplane, used by the former Lunar Army, and the jet was located close to the pilot cabin.
Donc ça n'était pas un avion.
Okay, so it wasn't a propeller-driven aircraft, is that correct?
Yes, it was a propellant airplane.
Vous aviez la moindre.
But before you were sent to China, did you have any kind of training in aeronautical things?
Answer, no.
Et vous avez effectivement.
And so by the end you knew how to pilot a T-28?
Answer, I learned about the theory, but I did not. I was not trained how to pilot it.
Quel était
So what exactly was the purpose of the training? What were you meant to be able to do on the aircraft?
Answer, I attended classes on theories how to fly the airplane.
Pouvez-vous répéter, monsieur, car l'interprète.
Could you please repeat that again, Mr. Witness? I think it didn't come through in the interpreting.
Council, could you help me understand the relevance of these questions?
secret, Madame le juge. Non.
It's a secret, madam. No, I want to know why this gentleman was sent to China, and then I want to ask him questions about his return and the reasons why Rosnim was so unhappy about the fact that he didn't want to go back to China. I'm trying to understand the logic of it all, what he was doing there. He apparently went to learn to fly bombers. Now I've just discovered that that wasn't really the case, so I am interested in looking further.
Thank you.
Alors, monsieur, quel était l'objet de votre...
So what exactly was the purpose of your training on T-28s? What exactly were you meant to learn? You were meant to come back from China with what kind of additional knowledge?
Answer: I do not know why I was sent to attend such class. I have no idea beyond the fact that I was merely assigned to get a training there. It was dependent on ANCA decision.
Pourquoi Rosnim...
Why was Rosnim so annoyed when you got back for brief vacation, apparently, but then, according to what you previously said, you refused to go back to China. Now, why was Rosnim so unhappy about this? What did he say?
Answer: he only suggested that I should go for further training until the completion of the course. And he stated during a lunchtime together, I may never forget this statement. He told me that we had to know how to fly this airplane so that we could capture back Cambodia Crown, Surin, Nogoriet. It was mentioned to me when I had a meal with him, and I told him back that I would not go back to the training abroad.